Good morning, ma'am.
I'm Dr. Indira from the Department of Zoology. We are going to have this webinar. So welcome to the awareness on COVID-19. So before starting this session, the commencement of this session, so let us do our prayer. A reading from the Holy Bible. Heal me, Lord, and I will be healed. Save me, Lord, and I will be saved. For you are the one I praise. This is the word of Lord, Jeremiah 17 verses 14. Jesus, our loving Father, you traveled through towns and villages, curing every disease and illness. At your command, the sick were made ill. Come to our aid now in the midst of the global spread of the coronavirus, that we may experience your healing love. Heal those who are sick with the virus. May they regain their strength and health through medical care. Heal us from our fear. Be with the families who are sick. Be with the doctors, nurses, researchers, and all medical professionals who seek to heal and help those affected. Bless all our management sisters, students, and staff with your loving care and protection. Now, I'm going to give you the theme of the webinar. The main objective of World Health Organization during the coronavirus pandemic is for all countries, the final aim is the same. Stop transmission and prevent the spread of the virus in order to save lives. Young people can play an important part in fighting COVID-19. To provide awareness among the students, we, the Department of Zoology, in association with IQAC, motivate them about COVID-19 through this online webinar. Today, we have in our midst very young resource person, Dr. Alekhya. She completed her MBBS last year at Maharaja Institute of Medical Sciences, Vijayanagaram. Now she is preparing for PG NEET. Now I request Dr. Alekhya to give your presentation on COVID-19 clinico-pathological correlation and its management. లేదమ్మా ఇది కదా
Good morning, everybody. I'm grateful to the management for giving me this opportunity of enhancing the knowledge on the current situation of the COVID-19. So let's come to the epidemiology. This COVID-19 is caused by the SARS-CoV-2. The SARS-CoV-2 is nothing but a severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. Now this is also called as novel coronavirus. This virus is a single-stranded RNA virus, belongs to the family of a Coronaviridae, and this spreads from person to person through the droplet transmission or the fomites transmission. Let's know about the pathophysiology of this virus. So the disease progresses to 3 stages, and these are the early infectious phase, pulmonary phase, and severe hyperinflammatory phase. During the early infectious phase, this virus first goes and binds to the nasal epithelial cells in our nose. There it starts replicating and binds to the ACE2 receptors in the lungs. Then it enters into the pulmonary phase where it causes the damage to type 2 alveolar cells. Usually these type 2 alveolar cells are required for maintaining the surface tension of the alveoli and also to keep the alveolar patent even during the expiration. But once these are damaged by this virus, and the epithelium and endothelium will also be destroyed. So then these leukocytes will be recruited or will enter into the alveoli, and this further causes the pulmonary damage and also causes hypoxemia in the patient, which we see as shortness of breath. And this slants the patient into MODS, which is multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. So in few patients, we see this host inflammatory response being continuously amplifying, and this causes very high systemic inflammation, and this is called as the cytokine storm or MODS. This is a patient-specific reaction and an idiosyncratic reaction. We cannot predict in which patients and whom are going to be affected by this reaction. Coming to the clinical features, the patient might present with a fever, dry cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, and headache, diarrhea, vomiting, anosmia, altered taste, and respiratory distress. So let's clear our confusion, the biggest confusion of whom to suspect and whom to test. We have to suspect and test in all the individuals with a history of international travel in the last 14 days and all the symptomatic contacts of the laboratory confirmed cases, all symptomatic healthcare workers and asymptomatic and high risk contacts have to be tested once between the day 5 to day 7 of coming into contact with the primary case. And also all symptomatic individuals within the containment zones and all the hospitalized patients who have been hospitalized for other causes and who are developing these influenza related symptoms now, and all the symptomatic migraines or the returnees within the 7 days of illness. Next, let's see how to diagnose this infection. We have different methods of diagnosis, and these are RT-PCR. We have a TrueNAT, rapid antigen kits are available. Also, we have to check for the blood investigations. So this RT-PCR, it is a gold standard investigation, but still the result will take about 4 to 6 hours, and TrueNAT will take about 1 to 2 hours, and rapid antigen kits, they take just 15 to 20 minutes. And this rapid antigen kit will detect both the immunoglobulin G and M. For the swab specimen, we take usually the nasal swab is more preferred than the throat swab, because this nasal swab is having high sensitivity results more than the throat swab. We can also take from the specimen can be also taken from the bronchial alveolar lavage or endotracheal tube aspirate or any sputum. And we have to check for the blood investigations too, and these will include checking for the WBC count, lymphocytes, and the C-reactive protein, lactate dehydrogenase, troponin levels, and D-dimer, and the serum ferritin, and aspartate transaminase, alanine transaminase, and the creatine kinase. For a typical COVID-19 infected patient, we'll see an increase in the WBC count, decreased lymphocyte count, and increase in the CRP levels, lactate dehydrogenase levels, and serum troponin, and D-dimer, and also an increase in the ferritin, and AST levels, ALT levels will also rise, and there will be an creatine kinase. So let's see what we can do to check for this in a very diffuse pattern. So this haziness is called as ground glass opacities. We can here appreciate the haziness in the lung fields very in a diffuse manner. These are called as bilateral ground glass opacities. Next, on a CT, we can appreciate the involvement of the lungs is more in the peripheral and the basal lobes than more than in the central area. So this pattern is appearing like a pavement pattern. So this is called as a crazy paving pattern of the COVID-19 pneumonia. So this involvement is called as the bilateral ground glass opacities, and this involvement is also called as consolidation. So we see here the crazy paving pattern, which is involving the peripheral lobes of the lungs. On CT, we have the staging called as CORAD staging for the COVID-19 pneumonia, which is strictly based on the level of suspicion of infection. But this CT is not at all recommended for the diagnosis of the COVID-19 infection. So we have namely 6 stages for the CORAD staging. Namely, the CORAD 1 will represent that the patient is normal and is non-infectious completely. In CORAD 2, the patient could be infectious either because of COVID-19 or it could be other infections also. So in CORAD 3, it is unclear whether it is COVID-19 or not. For a CORAD 4, it is patient is abnormal, but we have a slight suspicion of COVID-19. For a CORAD 5, it is a typical COVID-19 infection. In a CORAD 6, the patient will be completely RT-PCR positive with confirmed COVID-19 pneumonia. So let us see what if it is less than 8, we consider it as mild infection. If it is 9 to 15, it is moderate infection, and if it is more than 15, it is considered as a severe infection. So recently, as told by Dr. Andip Guleria, of director of AIMS, he said that the CT scans and the biomarkers are being misused and they're harmful too, because there is no use of a CT scan if you have already a mild COVID. Because one CT scan is equivalent to almost 300 to 400 chest X-rays, and it will also increase the risk of getting cancer in the future in the young individuals. So let us see what are the management guidelines recommended by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare for the COVID-19 patient. We have classified these COVID-19 patients into mild, moderate, and severe patients. For a mild patient, the patient should fulfill this criteria, and these are the patient should have upper respiratory tract infections symptoms, and either without or with fever, or with or without shortness of breath or hypoxia. And now we recommend this patient to undergo home isolation and strict care with hand hygiene and social distancing and symptomatic management, including the hydration and antipyretics and antitussives. So we also recommend to make the patient stay in contact with the contact with the physician. Yeah, we also tell the patient to take immediate medical attention if his respiratory rate is more than 24 per minute, or SpO2 is less than 94%, or if there is any shortness of breath, any high grade fever or cough which is persisting for more than 5 days of illness from the sorry onset of symptoms. And we also use add-on drugs for these mild infected patients, like
ఏదో
inhalation
చెప్తుంది వాళ్ళ
budesonide.
భాషలో చెప్తుంది ఇంగ్లీష్లోనే చెప్తుంది చెప్తే
Inhalational budesonide, which is a steroid used
నా
in
పూలు నవ్వుకుపోతుంది అమ్మో
We also use some add-on drugs for this mild infection patients, and take the inhalational budesonide, which is a dry powder inhaler, if the fever or cough is persisting for more than 5 days. And systemic steroid is also used, but usually it is contraindicated for the mild infected patients. We use these steroids only in certain high-risk patients who are having the fever or cough for more than 7 days, only in consultation with the treating doctor for 3 to 5 days. And these steroids could be tablet dexamethasone. We also give tablet ivermectin 200 microgram per kg OD, but for 3 to 5 days, and this is contraindicated strictly for the pregnant and lactating females. If fever is not controlled with a maximum dose of paracetamol, we can use a tablet naproxen 250 mg BD. Next, let us see for now. Let us see for the moderate disease patient. These patients should have the respiratory rate either more than or equal to 24 per minute, or their saturation of oxygen should be less than or equal to 93% on room air. Then we recommend these patients to admit into ward. For the treatment, we will include for these patients with oxygen support or anti-inflammatory or immunomodulatory therapy, any anticoagulants, and we check up these patients, follow up these patients with clinical monitoring or laboratory monitoring. So for oxygen support, we have to have a target of oxygen sats of 92 to 96%, and the preferred devices for oxygenation are non-rebreathing face mask. We can also recommend these patients to have awake proning who are requiring supplemental oxygen therapy with sequential position changes every 1 to 2 hours. Anti-inflammatory or immunomodulator therapies we include with injection methylprednisolone or dexamethasone. These are given for 5 to 10 days, and the patient can be switched to oral route if once the patient is stable and is improving. So for anticoagulants, we give conventional dose of prophylactic lumaglutide heparin. For example, we give enoxaparin in a subcutaneous route once daily, 0.5 mg per kg. For clinical monitoring, we can check for the work of breathing, how's the hemodynamic status of the patient, and any changes in the oxygen requirement. And we also follow up with serial chest X-rays and the chest CTs. These are only done if the patient condition is worsening. So for laboratory monitoring, we check up for CRP, D-dimer levels every 48 to 72 hours, and complete blood count, liver function test, and renal function test every 24 to 48 hours. And interleukin 6, IL-6 levels are done only if the patient condition is worsening. Now let us see for the severe disease patients. For a severe disease patient, the respiratory rate has to be more than 30 per minute, or the O2 sats has to be less than 90% on room air. Then we recommend these patients to admit into ICU. For the treatment, we again give, we include with respiratory support, anti-inflammatory or immunomodulator therapy, and anticoagulants, and we give some supportive measures, and we follow up later with the monitoring, with the clinical and laboratory monitoring again. For respiratory support, we consider the use of NIV, non-invasive ventilation, either by helmet or a face mask, or high frequency nasal cannulation in patients with increasing requirement of oxygen, if or if the work of breathing is very low. And intubation should be prioritized in patients with high risk of breathing, or if the NIV is not tolerated. So we can also use a conventional ARDS net protocol if, for usage of in the ventilatory management. Then for anti-inflammatory and immunomodulator therapy, we again same steroid usage we consider with injection methylprednisolone or dexamethasone for 5 to 10 days, and anticoagulants with prophylactic dose of low molecular weight heparin or unfractionated heparin. For example, we give enoxaparin 0.5 mg per kg per dose in a subcutaneous route twice daily. And we give some supportive measures too by maintaining the patient's euvolemic status, by giving some fluid management and maintaining the patient's hydration. But if this septic shock has already occurred, or if the sepsis has already occurred, we have to manage the patient according to the antibiotic. We give antibiotics and also IV fluids. For monitoring, we go for serial chest X-rays and chest CTs. HRCT has to be done only if the patient's condition is worsening. So laboratory monitoring will include C-reactive protein levels and D-dimer levels every 24 to 48 hours, and CBC and liver function tests and renal function tests are done daily. And IL-6 levels have to be done only if the condition of the patient is very much deteriorating. So for a moderate and severe cases, after the treatment, or if there is any clinical improvement is witnessed, then the patient is discharged according to the discharging criteria. There are some high risk factors for the disease, severe disease and mortality. And these are age, if the age is more than 60 years or any cerebrovascular diseases are present, any diabetes or hypertension or cardiovascular diseases or coronary artery diseases, any chronic diseases of lung, kidney, and liver, and obesity. These are the risk factors for the severe disease or mortality. So now nowadays our major problem is that we have a limited access to the oxygen cylinders. So what if our oxygen saturation levels will drop below 94%? What to do? So we recommend the patient to undergo awake proning or self proning. This is a medically approved technique to improve the oxygen deprivation in the patient. So this consists of three positions. In position one, the patient will lay on his belly, and this is done for a duration of 30 minutes with the three pillows beneath the patient, one pillow beneath the neck bone, and one pillow beneath the pelvic area, and one pillow beneath your foot. And remember that the position of the head has to be a level below the body level here. So in position 2, the patient will be recommended to be in a sit-up position with a slightly in slanted position. Make yourself comfortable in this position. This is done for a duration of 30 minutes again. And next position, the patient will lay on his side to the right side, and again with three pillows beneath him, and with one pillow below the head, one pillow below the waist, and one pillow in between the legs. So this is also done for a duration of 30 minutes. And please keep switching. In this way, we keep switching between these three positions every 30 minutes. And please make yourself as comfortable as possible. And do remember to keep your room well ventilated with your windows open, because if the room is very much closed, these respiratory droplets that are released from the patient will be surviving for a long time in the closed atmosphere itself. So this may later also infect the other people who might be entering into your room for other purposes. So please keep your rooms well ventilated and try to breathe the fresh air as much as possible. But this proning is avoided in certain people, and these patients are they could be pregnant patients or hemodynamic instability patients. The patient is a known case of deep vein thrombosis, any cardiac conditions, and should not do proning for 1 hour after the meals, or if the patient is having any fractures of spine, femur, or pelvis. So these are the COVID-19 management guidelines as given by AIMS New Delhi in collaboration with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare that we have already discussed earlier. So, but we have some off-label drugs now, which are becoming very popular, and these are the remdesivir, tocilizumab, and convalescent plasma therapy. So this remdesivir is becoming a very popular and magic drug among the public. But according to the government of India, it is recommended using the remdesivir in home settings or without the doctor's consultation is strictly prohibited. But let us know when this remdesivir has to be given. This is given in the moderate to severe diseases who are requiring supplemental oxygen therapy or who are within 10 days of symptom onset, and with the patient has should not have any renal or hepatic dysfunction, and the recommended dosage is about 200 mg per day IV on day 1, followed by 100 mg per day IV OD for the next 4 days. So the next drug is tocilizumab. This tocilizumab is given in the presence of severe disease within 24 to 48 hours of the onset of severe disease or ICU admission, or if there is any significantly increased inflammatory markers like CRP or IL-6. So, or if the patient is having no improvement despite the use of steroids, and if there is no active bacterial or fungal or tubercular infections, then we can give this tocilizumab, which is a monoclonal antibody. The recommended dosage we give is 4 to 6 mg per kg in 100 ml normal saline over 1 hour. And coming to the convalescent plasma therapy, this is much more used only in the early moderate disease within 7 days of the symptom onset. and there has to be availability of high titer donor plasma. And the usual dose we recommend is 200 ml given over a period of more than or equal to 2 hours. So next, our biggest doubt is to when to discontinue the home isolation. In symptomatic cases, after 10 days of the symptom onset, and the patient is not having, and if the patient is not having any fever in the last 3 days, then the patient can end his home isolation. And in asymptomatic cases, after 10 days from the date of sampling, the patient can end his home isolation. But now, do remember the important point is there is no need of testing after the home isolation period is over. So let us see what is this multi-system inflammatory syndrome in the children and the adolescents. This is a major complication. The more commoner we are witnessing in the children and adolescents of age less than 19 years nowadays, and this is usually seen. And we can also encounter much more cases after 4 to 6 weeks after this COVID peak. The COVID peak, so the child will have a fever of more than 3 days, and multiple system will be involved, and the patient will have abdominal pain, diarrhea, and hypotension and shock, and the patient will have skin rashes and bilateral non-purulent conjunctivitis. In heart, the patient will have myocarditis, pericarditis, valvulitis, and coronary abnormalities. Patient could also have the bleeding disorders and coagulopathy. The patient will definitely have IgG positive for SARS-CoV-2, and the child will present with also a delayed cytokine storm. And these features are quite similar to the Kawasaki disease that we have been encountering. The Kawasaki disease is a heart disease in children, most commonly seen. For diagnosis of this multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children, we have to do for ESR, neutrophil count, sodium levels, D-dimer levels, serum ferritin levels, C-reactive protein, and lymphopenia, and albumin, pro-BNP levels, and platelet levels, and serology levels of which are IgG positive. We see rise in the ESR and increase in the neutrophil count and increase in the sodium levels. We also see increase in the D-dimer levels and increase in the serum ferritin, increase in the CRP, and decrease in the lymphopenia, and increase in the lymphocyte count, and a decrease in the albumin levels, and proBNP levels will also increase. Platelet levels will increase. So for the treatment, we give IV immunoglobulin and with aspirin. If this fails, we give IV methylprednisolone, which is a steroid. So coming to the another complication which we have been hearing and watching in the news, the fungal infection that has been occurring in the post-recovery patients and certain high-risk patients. This is nothing but the mucormycosis. This mucormycosis is a dangerous complication. If this is untreated, it can turn into a fatal complication. So this mucormycosis is a fungal infection that mainly affects the people who are on medication for like steroids for other health problems, and that reduces their ability to fight these environmental pathogens which are naturally present. So the sinuses or the lungs of such individuals will get affected by these fungal spores which are inhaled from the air. And this can lead to some serious disease with some warning signs and symptoms. And these warning signs and symptoms are pain and redness around the eyes and or nose, and fever, coughing, blood vomiting, and shortness of breath, and altered mental status. So in whom does this infection is much more predisposed? The predisposing factors are uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, any prolonged ICU stay, or any comorbidities like post-transplant patients and patients suffering from malignancies, and immunosuppression by steroids, and voriconazole therapy. So let us know how to prevent this. Please use masks if you're visiting any dusty construction sites, and please wear shoes, long trousers, long sleeve shirts, and gloves while handling the soil, during the gardening or moss or any manure because they contain an abundant amount of fungal spores. So also maintain personal hygiene, including the thorough scrub bath. So when should we suspect this complication? This complication is more common in the post-COVID recovery patients, especially diabetics and who are immunocompromised individuals. If the patient is having any features of sinusitis, like nasal blockade or congestion, any nasal discharge which is blackish or bloody, any local pain on the cheek, any one-sided facial pain or numbness, or if there is any swelling, and any blackish discoloration over the bridge of the nose or palate, if there is any toothache, any loosening of the teeth, any jaw involvement, and if there is any blurred or double vision with pain and fever and skin lesions like thrombosis and presenting with necrosis, then chest pain, any pleural effusions or hemoptysis, cough with blood associated cough, and worsening of respiratory symptoms. So what are the do's and don'ts? We have to have a control on the hyperglycemia. Increased blood glucose levels have to be controlled, and monitor the blood glucose levels in post-COVID recovered patients, and especially in the diabetics. Also, you have to use the steroids judiciously, means at correct timing, at correct dose, and at correct duration. So please use clean sterile water for humidifiers while using this oxygen therapy, and please use antibiotics or antifungals in a judicious manner. So what are the don'ts means? Please do not miss these warning signs and symptoms we have discussed earlier, and do not consider all the cases with blocked nose as bacteriosinusitis, particularly in case of this immunosuppressed patients and or this COVID-19 patients who are on these immunomodulator therapies like injectable steroids like methylprednisolone and the dexamethasone, and do not hesitate to seek getting any aggressive investigation. It's appropriate for the fungal like KOH mount staining and microscopy and culture of this fungal spores. And also do not lose crucial time to initiate this treatment for the mucormycosis. Uh, so what is the management? And the management includes we have to have a control on the diabetes and diabetic ketoacidosis. And please reduce the steroids if the patient is still on steroids, and continue the modulated drugs like injection methylprednisolone, injection dexamethasone, and no antifungal prophylaxis is needed in this case. And we do extensive surgical debridement to remove all the necrotic debris that is present in the specified area. And the actual medical management will include installing a peripherally inserted central catheter, PICC line, and we have to maintain an adequate systemic hydration in the patient by giving normal saline infusion IV. Then followed by we give antifungal amphotericin B infusion. Then antifungal therapy is given for at least 4 to 6 weeks. At last, please monitor these patients clinically and with radio imaging for knowing the response of the patient to the treatment, and to know the progression of the disease. So, in a nutshell, this mucormycosis or the so-called fungal infection will need a team approach, which is containing, which comprises of a microbiologist, internal medicine specialist, intensivist, neurologist, ophthalmologist, an ENT specialist, a dentist, and a surgeon who's a maxillofacial or a plastic surgeon, and a biochemist also. So let us know this wonder drug nowadays becoming more popular, the 2-DG. This is nothing but a 2-deoxy D-glucose. It is an antimetabolite, was used for cancer treatments. And the clinical treatment trials have shown successful results on reducing the oxygen requirement in the patients of severe disease, and also preventing the hospitalization, and this reduces the supplemental oxygen dependence on the patients. There is an increased, we have been also witnessing an increased proportion of the RT-PCR negative conversions in these patients, and then this used as an adjunct therapy in the moderate to severe disease patients only, and it's not for any mild disease patients. This is administered orally by dissolving the powder form in water, so this is very used very easily. So let us unite to fight the corona. And please do remember to wear a mask and wash your hands. And please maintain the social distancing by maintaining at least 6 feet. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Alekia, for sharing your excellent technical knowledge. Now, I'm going to remind you on the topic coronavirus disease, adolescents and youth. World Health Organization collected some of the queries raised by our adolescents. Now, I would like to deliver some information about this. Can adolescents catch COVID-19? Yes, all age groups can catch COVID-19. While we are still learning about how COVID-19 affects people, so far data suggests that children under the age of 18 years have few deaths compared to other age groups, and usually mild disease. However, cases of critical illness have been reported. As with adults, pre-existing medical problems like high BP, heart and lung problems, asthma, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and neurological and developmental conditions are the risk factors for severe disease and intensive care admission in children. Can adolescents spread COVID-19? Yes. Infected people in all age groups, including adolescents, can transmit the virus to other people, even if they have mild symptoms or do not feel ill. The virus is spread from person to person through liquid particles such as aerosols and droplets from the nose or mouth, which are spread when a person with COVID-19 coughs, sneezes, or speaks. People can catch COVID-19 if they breathe in these droplets from an adolescent infected with the virus. Therefore, it is important to stay at least 1 meter away from others. These droplets can land on objects and surfaces. People can then become infected by touching these objects or surfaces and then touching their eyes, nose, or mouth. So here you can see the various different kinds of guidelines we have to follow during this time. Wash your hands, wear a mask and avoid crowds, and maintain a distance of 6 feet, and follow food safety guidelines, and donate blood and plasma by adolescents. And also there is a wearing of masks and save PPE, etc. So make a difference during the COVID-19 time and slow the spread of COVID-19. When out with your friends, wear a mask and also stay 6 feet apart from others. Clean frequently, touch objects like phones, etc. Do not touch your eyes, nose, and mouth. Waiting for people to see your screen and your screen రావట్లేదా స్క్రీన్ రావట్లేదంటావా లేదు 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 లేదు. Then next one is, what should I do if someone in my family gets really ill with COVID-19? Immediately seek medical care if a member of your family gets seriously ill. For example, develops a difficulty in breathing or feels pain or pressure in the chest. If possible, either you or an adult should contact your healthcare provider and find out where and how you could get care. If your family member is confined as having COVID-19, you must be prepared that you and other known contacts will need to isolate for 14 days and monitor symptoms even if you feel healthy. I am on medication for a chronic health condition. Should I change anything? For people with chronic conditions such as asthma, diabetes, TB, and HIV, the most important thing is to continue your medication as prescribed. Attend recommended checkups and seek medical help if you have new symptoms. Seek advice from your health authorities and healthcare provider on how to be protected from COVID-19 and continue your treatment. And also take some services such as counseling, etc. I am bored spending so much time at home. Is it necessary to follow the guidelines of COVID-19? Spending more time at home is very difficult and can get boring, but it may be to do something you enjoy. This could be reading books, playing games, or listening to music. Try to stay connected with your friends and family every day through phone or internet. You can also get involved with your community to help fight the transmission of the virus. At the same time, it is still really important that you reduce your chances of being infected or spreading COVID-19 by washing your hands as often as possible, keeping at least 6 feet from other people, even if adolescents with a positive usually do not have any symptoms and could spread it to others. You have the power to take part in fighting COVID-19. Some of my friends are not sticking the rules of physical distancing. What should I do? Explain to your friends why it is important to protect themselves and others by washing their hands, avoiding touching your face, physical distancing measures. You can share ideas about virtual activities. You can encourage them. For example, you can encourage them to join in Youth Against COVID-19 campaign that aims to help teach young people around friends, families, and communities safe. But remember, do not argue or fight, only try to change their minds. Now, the role of youth. So you have to raise your awareness about COVID-19 and make in this way. Use youth-led organizations and networks to promote measures about COVID-19 and also having community response. Young people, when informed and empowered, realize that what they do truly make a difference and change the world. By Jan Goodall. Thank you so much. Now I request Dr. Madhvi Rani ma'am to give a motivating talk about COVID-19 to all of us.
Good morning, Indra. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Indra, for introducing me. Now, wellness and resilience during COVID. You can see the picture of a person here. How you feel inside is also important. So, coping with COVID, mental health in times of coronavirus. How you feel inside. Just think for 1 minute. Tensed, stressed, depressed, and many more. All of us are having so much of knowledge about COVID-19. It was declared as public health emergency by World Health Organization. So all of us should be careful. Now let us recollect the common responses of people affected by COVID-19. In an epidemic, it is normal for individuals, no matter of children, adolescents, adults, and elderly, to feel stressed and worried. Common responses of people affected both directly and indirectly, they include many points. Fear of getting ill and passing away. Avoiding going to hospital or healthcare facilities due to fear of becoming infected. Fear of not being able to work during isolation, being dismissed from work and losing their income. Fear of being placed in quarantine due to fear of not being able to work during isolation, being dismissed from work and losing their income. It is the major problem nowadays. Fear of being placed in quarantine due to association with the disease and then being socially isolated or excluded. Feeling powerless to protect the family and the fear of loved ones dying because of the virus. Feelings of helplessness, boredom, and loneliness due to isolation. See this picture. This is the ultimate feeling, I can say. All of us have experienced this. Am I right? So am I next? Is my mother next? Is my cousin next? Is my father next? Is my sister next? Really a horrible feeling. Next, coming to mental health issues as a result of COVID-19. You can see the picture here, and you can also see the picture here. All people of all age groups are affected by this. Due to this global pandemic, people faced many challenges and disruptions like fear, anxiety, depression, mental breakdown, panic attacks, feelings of helplessness, etc. And here we have research studies on mental health and COVID-19. It is a growing crisis. From late February through August, 388,961 people, they were included in moderate to severe for depression or anxiety. From late February through August, an additional number are screened at risk for psychosis. Since March 1st, 131,122 depression screeners reported the problem. And more people impacted by the depression, and many people suffered from anxiety. So you can see the numbers here. There were over 48,000 moderate to severe anxiety persons and 94,000 moderate to severe depression screeners in this. These impacts on mental health are more pronounced in adolescent people less than 25 years of age group. Loneliness and isolation are also were shown by some people. And here you can see the impact of lockdown on the lifestyle of 18 to 24 years old people. 42% people slept more during this time. 62% snacked more on unhealthy foods. 45% people ate more on takeaways. 50% took up or they did more exercise. According to a study in the first 2 weeks following corona conducted by Wang et al., females were reported more degree of the psychological impact of the outbreak, anxiety, and depression. And studies also reported a high prevalence of psychological disturbances during longer duration of quarantine, which was associated with a prevalence of stress disorder symptoms. All of us are having one general doubt. COVID-19 makes me so anxious. Then what should I do? In situations like a pandemic, it is very normal to feel anxious and powerless, and that is okay. Here are few suggestions on things that could help you proactively manage your anxiety. It is very, very important. Dear students, kindly follow the points. Tip 1, do things that are good to your body and mind. Your body and mind are connected. Here are some things you can do to keep them healthy. Stay active. Being physically active is good for your body and can help your mind feel better too. If you can go outside, try a walk, run, bike ride, or any other sport. If indoors, try dancing, stretching, or any other movement you can do. Find what works for you and do it. There is no hard and fast rule. Eat well. Try to make healthy choices about what you eat if you can. Take notice of yourself and the world around you. This means becoming more aware of your breathing, your body, and your surroundings. Try to be present in the moment. Sleep. Try to get the right balance of sleep each night. This will help you grow well and stay healthy. Find things that make you happy and do those things more. Even you can try something new. Next tip, stay connected to loved ones. Keep in touch with your family and friends. Use social media, email, phone calls, or write a letter. Be creative. And if you can't connect, then think about a memory of a shared time together. Next tip, recognize how you are feeling. Understanding how you feel is important. Don't ignore it. Sometimes writing your feelings down on a paper can help you to describe it. It might sound easy or simple, but try. Next tip, be kind to yourself. It is most important. Putting pressure on yourself to always be happy or stay positive or stay productive, all these points sometimes make you feel worse. Instead, if you notice you are experiencing difficult emotions, try telling yourself, I feel worried and scared due to circumstances, but that does not mean I am not coping. It has been a tough time. It is okay to be upset. It is also a normal one. These are difficult times. It is normal to feel upset. You just think like this. Or think of something to tell yourself that works for you. Next tip, listen to your body. It is also most important. Our body experiences and reacts to how we feel. Do you often get headaches? Do your shoulders, chest, or stomach sometimes feel tensed? Try closing your eyes and listening to your own breathing. Notice how you feel in each part of your body, starting from your head down to your toes. Notice if you are feeling any tightness, pain, or pressure in your body. Being aware of where you are feeling tensed can help you release it. Next one, try using your breath to calm yourself. Slow breathing is one of the quickest ways of calming down the body when we experience feelings such as fear, worry, or anger. This is the best remedy. Close your eyes and think of a calm place also. Imagine yourself there and feel relaxed. Next, focus on breathing slowly. Breathe in for a slow count of 3 and breathe out for a slow count of 3. Practice this for a few minutes. Definitely you will feel better. Next tip, avoid unhealthy ways of coping with stress. When you are experiencing difficult feelings, it is important to find healthy ways to take care of yourself. Next tip, replace some amount of screen time to non-screen activities. All of you have an idea about this? Listening to music, reading, some physical activity like going for a walk or jog. Next one, spend time in your garden. Grow plants. It is the need for your health. Make it a habit. Next tip, when solutions to problems are hard to find, it can help to talk through with the people whom you trust, who may be able to help, or it can be a person to discuss ideas with. Next tip, if you feel your mental health is taking a big toll and it is affecting you much more than expected, then engage in stress management activities. Regularly do yoga, pranayamam, etc. Next tip, as John Green says, give positive suggestions to your brain. You are stronger than you believe. One symptom of depression or anxiety is having catastrophic thoughts. It may seem like we are living in a catastrophe right now, but there is hope that things could get better. Part of what makes anxiety or depression is when your brain is telling you something that is not true. You may be developing thoughts that it will never get better. So you need to tell yourself that there is hope. Things will get better and this pandemic is not going to go on forever. And you are stronger than you believe. Next tip, reach out for mental healing support. There are so many opportunities nowadays, so you can make use of them. Reach out for mental health support. As Theodore Roosevelt says, courage is not having the strength to go on. It is going on when you don't have the strength. You may be feeling very down right now and believe there is no point in putting effort into anything if there is a pandemic forcing us to stay in our homes. The truth is that you can still make an effort to improve your life right from your home. If you are feeling sad, find the strength in yourself to keep going on with your normal routine. When will this pandemic end? And so the things will become normal. All of us are thinking like that. We don't know when this pandemic will end, but every person should contribute to the society. There are simple contributions, just like not seeing your friends, not spending more time in public places, are simple contributions to fight this pandemic. So all of you can practice this, I think. It is important that you continue to practice and take the necessary measures and encourage your friends and family members to prevent the situation from getting worse. What can we do? To prevent the disastrous effects of infectious diseases, recognize that human health is intimately connected to animals and our environment. Hope all of you remember this COVID-19 is a zoonotic disease. So we should take care of animals also, and at the same time, we have to take care of our environment. Millions of young people have already mobilized to all these activities, and they are concentrating only on climate and biodiversity, but also they are fighting for the right clean air and for their future on a livable planet. You can join them to add your voice and talents to this movement. I'm not what happened to me. I am what I chose. So he says, Carl Jung says, it implies we do not have to let our circumstances modify us. We can still rise above our circumstances and make life ourselves more beautiful. And take home message. It is during our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light, Aristotle Onassis says. Robert Frost already said, the best way out is always through. So remember this point and be bold and lead a happy life. Thank you so much. Stay home and stay safe. Finally, we have come to the end of this program. Any program will not come to an end without two words, thank you. First and foremost, I thank Lord Almighty for all the blessings He has been showering on all of us, especially throughout this program. For successful launching of any program, one has to get a lot of moral support and total cooperation from the management. I gratefully acknowledge the support given by our superior and correspondent, Dr. Sister Marietta Pudota. I would like to express a deep sense of gratitude to our principal, Dr. Sister Marietta Di Mello. My sincere thanks to our Vice Principal and Director PG Courses for her constant support. We are thankful to all our departmental members for their constant support, very especially our HOD, Dr. R. Indira Madam. We convey our heartfelt thanks to the resource person, Dr. D. Alekia, for accepting our invitation and for sharing her knowledge with us. May God bless her in all her endeavors. I congratulate all the participants for their participation. I would like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Madhavi, Coordinator IQSC, for her support. We are thankful to Mr. Tommy and Mr. Sharif for technical support. Thank you.
So all of you, once again, thank you so much and stay safe.